just like day-to-day tasks with a lot of like transferring stuff back and forth, and also working with high resolution files, and also powering 2 Apple Pro Display XDRs. My current computer is the Mac Pro from 2019, and it's one that I invested quite a bit of money in before Apple's Silicon was really talked about. But with this computer right here, it has honestly been able to match, if not exceed, the performance that I get on that $20,000 computer. And this right here isn't even the top model. It is the M1 Pro model of the 16-inch MacBook Pro that has 10 cores of CPU paired with 16 cores of GPU and 32 gigabytes of memory. And all that comes together to give you just one of the most incredible MacBook experiences that has come out to date. To be totally honest, Apple's MacBook Pros in particular over the past like 5 years ago haven't really been good for anyone who needs that performance. I've really given it a chance a few times, whether it was a 15-inch or the 16-inch computer, and year after year I'd purchased the highest end model, whether it was the i7, the i9, the GPU options, and I was never impressed by the performance. The fans would always be on, the computer would be overheating, it would thermal throttle, and the battery life also wasn't very good, so I eventually went over to their desktop computer because as a Mac user who was looking for that performance, it was really the only good option for many years. As always, if you guys want to see videos as soon as they come out, make sure you go ahead and subscribe to the channel, drop a like on this video, and also leave a comment down below if you have any questions, and I'll try my best to get to them. Even though the wait was long for a redesign, I feel like Apple in every way has really delivered on everything that the consumers have been suggesting and have kind of been picking on all in one computer. It's got the performance, the battery life, an incredible display, the ports are back, and in general, we're going to be talking about the hardware, the display, the performance, the battery life, and just everything that you need to know about the M1 MacBook Pro. So for starters, this MacBook right here has quite a few visible changes. It is very reminiscent of like the pre-2015 era of Retina MacBooks that were really thin and focused on always trying to compact in many ways as possible. And I felt like that was always a bit of a weird compromise because for professional users, priority is in the performance. And those computers just really weren't able to perform because they always focus on making them even thinner. And to be totally honest, even though this is kind of going back to like a simple design of the past, I'm totally fine with it. From the outside, it is a little bit thicker for sure. Not only in like the squared off edges and like the raised feet and also in like the larger display enclosure, but in general, it is actually thicker. And you're gonna notice that specifically in the 16-inch model, whereas in the 14-inch model, it is actually quite similar in the dimensions, except for the fact that it just isn't as rounded or tapered as it was before. The keyboard is also like a contrasting black color in its area, and I actually think that looks pretty good. Some might complain that it makes it a little bit harder to see the different areas between the keys, and I do agree with that, but overall, I think from an aesthetic standpoint, it looks great. The next thing, of course, is the ports, and starting out with the left side, you have the MagSafe 3, which supports charging speeds of up to 140 watts on the MacBook Pro 16-inch. MagSafe is really great because it allows you to charge a computer without taking one of the Thunderbolt 4 ports, but at the same time, if you need to borrow your friend's charger and you forgot your own, you can still charge a computer. And if anybody trips on that cable, even though the magnet is a lot stronger, I found in the return of MagSafe compared to the older ones, it is able to just attach and your computer doesn't go with it. You also have 3 Thunderbolt 4 ports, which I feel like is good, but it would have been nice to even have 4. But with the MagSafe and the ability to charge without having to use one of those USB Type-C ports, it makes up for it in my opinion. And over on the right side, you do have an HDMI 2.0 port, which is really nice to be able to just plug it into any monitor or projector for any presentation, but it is a little bit interesting that it isn't HDMI 2.1. For those who don't know, HDMI 2.0 is able to support up to a 4K 60 resolution, so if you want to plug it into like a 4K 120 or also future-proof yourself with future resolutions up to 8K, then this HDMI port unfortunately doesn't support that. In addition to that, one of the Thunderbolt 4 ports are also found on the right side, paired with the SDXC card slot, which is nice that it has made its return because for any photographers out there especially, you might still use SD, and I know a lot of people are also shooting video on SD cards as well. So for any creative, I feel like all the ports are back and that is awesome. The other big talk though is also in the bezels and the notch. The bezel size has been reduced by about 20% and the top kind of area has been reduced by 60%, and you also have a notch right in the middle. And although there has been like a lot of memes and complaints about it, personally I don't really think it's a big issue at all because you have more screen real estate. It's not really taking away from anything, and for the most part, unless you have a ton of things on your top bar, then it doesn't really get in the way. Inside of that, you do have a FaceTime camera that is a 1080p resolution as well as a True Tone sensors, but I do feel like if they were to integrate like Face ID, for example, within that notch space, it would at least bring in a little bit more functionality for the space that it does take up. Even though the fingerprint sensor is perfectly fine, I think that would be like a nice additional feature that they add in the future. So when it comes to like the design side of things, I personally think it actually looks pretty good, and all the changes that they have added are exactly what users have been asking for quite a few years now. And even though that is going to come at a bit of an additional thickness, the computer overall still looks really solid. Whether you should get the silver or the space gray, I've kind of got a mixed opinion towards that. In the past, everything that comes in space gray, I'm going to get over silver any day of the week. But in my opinion, this generation sort of looks a little bit better in the silver, but at the same time, if you get a silver one, I'm sure a lot of people are just going to confuse it as like a very old MacBook that you haven't replaced, until you actually flip it open and they see the notch. So now on the display, this is honestly one of the most impressive areas of the MacBook Pro, and you're gonna notice it as soon as you open it. So this is what they call the Liquid Retina XDR. And on paper, it is essentially the exact same specs as Apple's Pro Display XDR. And just to have that caliber of screen on a mobile computer is great for anyone who is referencing colors, editing photos, and also doing video. And also for anyone who has like a desktop setup with a Pro Display XDR like myself, having that same reference in an on-the-go setup is also really awesome. On paper, this screen is able to sustain a brightness of 1000 nits and also go up to 1600 nits in HDR. And on top of that, it has a 1,000,000:1 contrast ratio. So exactly the same specs as the Pro Display XDR. But one thing to keep in mind is that in general use, it goes up to about 500 nits and it's able to smart adapt based on the content that you're displaying on screen. So it's not going to be at 1000 nits at all times, which is probably a good thing because, to be totally honest with you, if this thing was 1000 nits all day and you spend a whole day on it, you're not going to be able to sleep at night because it really does put a lot of strain on the eyes. And on top of that, you also have 120 hertz refresh rate. So when you're going through the menus and stuff, you will notice that it is just a little bit snappier, but a lot of the apps, including Apple's very own, have not been updated to take advantage of that 120 hertz. I think with the addition of the M1 chip, it has allowed Apple to do this on their laptop, because with any other previous generation computer, even though it would have been nice to have this caliber of screen, it would just drain the battery, and at that point there is just no point in having it. And by having this amount of peak brightness capability and the refresh rate, you really do need an efficient chip, and in this case there is one. I can go on and on about how good this Liquid Retina Display XDR looks, but just go to the Apple Store, take a look at it for the first time, and the way that I would describe it is that it's almost the same as when Apple first introduced Retina displays on the MacBook. I remember going and seeing it in person after having it on my iPhone, and it was just like so incredible. As someone who is dealing with color every day, it is an absolute joy. Before we jump into the actual power that this computer is able to deliver though, a very important aspect is how you're going to charge it, because this is actually able to run at its full power even when it is away from the charger. And that is something that Apple really emphasized. So this right here is Ugreen's new 100 watt gallium nitride fast charger. And I want to give a huge thanks to them for sponsoring this video. And I'm going to have a link down below with the discount code if you guys want to go ahead and check it out. But this right here is literally like the Swiss Army knife of fast chargers. It has so many features, but most importantly, it is able to charge your brand new 14 and 16-inch MacBook through USB Type-C at the maximum speed of 100 watts. Gallium nitride is a technology that I've actually heard a lot about lately, and it's become very popular in like the cutting edge in fast chargers. The reason why is that it is very smart and also very safe in how it charges all of your devices, whether it's the MacBook, your smartphone, iPhone, Android. It is able to deliver the best performance in the safest way possible. Its gallium nitride is an integrated circuit from Navitas, and it uses a number of other industry leaders such as ON Semi to provide a consistent charging experience that will serve many generations of cell phones and computers to come. It is able to operate at a higher voltage while wasting less energy through heat generation, which is really important for portable chargers, because in the past there wasn't really many high voltage chargers out there that were able to give you that fast charging experience to something like a laptop, and you would have to use like the first party chargers, for example. The gallium nitride technology operates 20 times faster than traditional silicon chips found in past generation chargers, and it also increases the power and charging speed by up to 3 times while cutting the overall size and weight. As you can see right here, this is significantly smaller than the charger that Apple offers. It is a great form factor for you to take it around, and it has a really nice like finish to it that is sleek, high quality. It has a 100 watt emblem right here, and I also love the fact that does have the 90-degree prong that you can just retract very easily, put it in your bag, and take it on the go as your all-in-one Swiss Army knife charger. The great thing about Ugreen's 100-watt charger is that it is one charger for all of your needs because it has 4 different ports. You have 3 of them that are USB Type-C, including 2 of them that are able to independently support a charge of up to 100 watts. And you also have a USB Type-A on the bottom in case you can't find a cable or still have like an older device. So whether you're charging your laptop or your smartphones, you can go ahead and plug it in all at one place. Based on the devices that I currently use, including the iPhone 13 Pro and the MacBook Pro 16-inch with M1 processor, this is able to charge the iPhone from 0 to 50% in just 30 minutes and the MacBook Pro 16-inch in under 2 hours. So to sum it up, Ugreen's 100-watt gallium nitride charger is able to either serve the 100 watts directly to your MacBook, or you can also use it to connect your tablet, your smartphone, or any other accessories that you do have to charge at the exact same time. And when you break it down and compare it to Apple's like 20-watt charger, for example, this right here is literally 4 times smaller. This is able to deliver significantly more power in one small size compared to having 4 of those individual chargers with only 1 port each. If you go ahead and compare a gallium nitride charger with a traditional charger after charging for a certain period of time, you'll notice that the gallium nitride one still stays completely neutral and cool to the touch, whereas the traditional chargers do heat up quite a bit. I think you especially notice that with some of the older chargers out there. So as I mentioned, if you guys want to go ahead and check this out for yourself, I've got a link down below with the discount code that is for a limited time if you want to save some money. And a huge thanks to Ugreen once again for sponsoring this video. So the most impressive thing about this new lineup of the MacBook Pro by far is the overall performance. And as a video creator, that has me very, very excited because of the graphics focus. And for anybody out there who demands a lot of performance and comes from a Mac, this is going to be an experience like nothing before. And the model that I have right here is actually not the maxed out model. It is with the M1 Pro processor that has 16-core GPU and 10-core CPU with 32 gigabytes of overall memory. So I feel like it's like a good medium where there is some upgrades here and there on the actual memory, but at the same time, it is not like maxed out to the brim to its top price point. And I feel like this is definitely going to be a configuration that a lot of people are going to consider. I have heard some great things about the M1 Max and the power that it's really able to deliver, but I'm actually still waiting for my M1 Max MacBook Pro 14-inch that is probably not going to come until about December. So I'm going to probably do a video on that when it comes. But from my experience of using the M1 Pro MacBook Pro 16-inch, I was absolutely blown away. At Apple's event, they do talk a lot about like 4K and 8K and how you can have multiple streams in like Final Cut Pro and editing and just what it's able to handle on paper. But to be totally realistic, almost every single person watching this video is not going to be filming and editing in 8K resolution, let alone having multiple streams. So just on like real life tests, I actually film in 5K and the footage is raw from the Red camera. And generally speaking, that is relatively intensive on the processor and the GPU whenever I'm in like DaVinci Resolve or in Final Cut Pro 10. The first thing I did was actually go into DaVinci Resolve, and the latest version is optimized for these new M1 processors. And I was just editing like the raw metadata, going through the color grading, also doing noise reductions, which is something that always seems to slow down even my $20,000 Mac Pro. And with that one stream of 5K footage, I was able to edit more smooth in this case than I have ever before, and I was thoroughly impressed, especially with the fact that it wasn't even plugged into the charger. I was able to do the different color grades, add different nodes, and as I mentioned with the noise reduction, it does usually slow down the actual export time, and that was all very noticeably just like so easy for this computer, even being the M1 Pro model. Going into Final Cut Pro, as expected, that was also extremely fast. It's Apple's own software that is optimized, and it's always been relatively fast on Apple's own computers. That is like my main editing software, and I think the overall experience when it comes to summing up the performance is that for the very first time, I feel like I can literally just take this computer everywhere, leave for like a month or something, and not need like my typical setup to rely on for all of my video editing. Because even though I did always buy like the highest end MacBook Pros, on paper they may have had like very big claims of like processing power, the RAM that you can buy and all that, but the true performance just wasn't that good. The fans would always kick in, and that kind of transitions into the discussion about battery life, because the M1 Pro is actually a little bit more efficient than the M1 M1 Max, and from my experience, based on like doing video editing and stuff, I was able to get like a full 5 hours of usage on what would usually drain the entire computer battery in about 3 hours on the previous generation MacBook Pro 16-inch. Some of the other stuff that I also do is photo editing, not professionally, but just for like YouTube and Instagram. And with Lightroom's latest update, they have like the smart object tracking with like the AI and being able to mask out certain portions, which is something that I do all the time. And just having the computer that is able to support that and having the XDR display on the go is really nice for referencing colors, not only in photo editing, but also in video editing. And especially if you're editing in large photo batches for like a wedding, for example, or just like a large shoot, having the faster SSD that is built in and also the graphics performance and doing photo editing, I think the Pro model is going to be one that is able to deliver that power for most people who are doing standard photo editing. But if you're looking for something that is like more graphics intensive, or you're editing in very high resolutions in both photo and video, then I'm sure at that level it is worth spending the additional money for the M1 Max processor. Even though it is nice to have better battery life, the most important thing is that this computer didn't compromise in any way when it was away from the charger. It didn't slow down the CPU and GPU, it didn't throttle or anything. The fans didn't even kick in until very late actually, and that is something that I'm not really used to. But at the same time, there is just literally zero compromise whether it was plugged into the charger or not. And if you're just watching video and doing general administrative work, then the battery life is really, really impressive, even on the larger model. And with the fast charging and the MagSafe and everything coming together, this is truly a professional portable experience that Apple has delivered. The way that I would sum it up is that for pro users out there, and especially for like videographers that I know because that was the industry that I was in the past, I would see people spend $6,000 to $7,000 on a MacBook simply because they want to have the very best portable setup that Apple offers at the moment. And that just makes total sense. When you're in the industry and you rely on something so much, you want to get the best one available. But at the end of the day, the performance still never really lived up, and I still heard complaints over the years. And I feel like for the first time, if you're going to be spending $6,000, $7,000, or in Canada, $8,000 or $9,000 on a computer completely speccing it out, you're going to feel like you did kind of get your money's worth when it comes to the performance that it's able to give. So what are my overall impressions of the MacBook Pro 16-inch, and which one am I personally going to be using as my daily computer? So this right here is the one with the M1 Pro, and even though it isn't like the top model out there, for 95% of users, this is going to be way more power than you're going to need. The M1 MacBook Air was a computer that I was recommending to the most general consumers in the last year, and for anyone who wanted the Pro performance, I suggested that they wait until this generation came out, and I would say that now is a really good time to go ahead and jump on it. Whether I'm going to be keeping the 14 or the 16-inch computer is one that I'm still trying to decide. I did go ahead and order a 14-inch M1 Max computer, and that is one that I feel like I'm going to use quite a bit because 16-inch for like a computer that I bring around in most cases is a little bit too big. But with the performance and the high wattage and the better battery life, the 16-inch when it comes to video editing and having that screen real estate may make a case for itself. But at the moment, because I am not traveling that much, I'm personally most excited for their desktop Pro M1 computer that is probably going to come out next year and is probably going to deliver the most insane performance, especially after the indications of performance that I've seen on this MacBook Pro 16-inch, even with the M1 Pro. The fact that it is able to deliver an uncompromised experience even away from the charger is absolutely incredible, and as someone who is in Apple's ecosystem, editing in ProRes and also using Final Cut Pro is essentially the most perfect scenario that really takes advantage of every ounce of this great processor and also the dedicated engines of encode and decoding for media. Along with that, the display is absolutely flawless, and it gives me like the desktop experience that I get with the Pro Display XDR on the go, with the ability to go up to 1,000 nits sustain depending on the content and up to 1,600 nits in HDR, the 120 Hz refresh rate, which is nice as apps start to support it, but at the moment is not really a big change. And on top of that, still a very respectable battery life even when running very heavy tasks. On the topic of battery life though, I would say in previous generation of MacBook Pros, the battery wasn't exactly good for anyone who had like moderate to intensive tasks. If you're like editing a video on like a MacBook Pro 16-inch, it would literally last like 3 hours and the performance would throttle insanely because it is not connected to power at all times. I think beyond the battery life itself, what is most impressive about this MacBook Pro is that I'm able to run the tasks at their full capability using every bit of the M1 processor without it throttling feeling at all when away from the charger. Whether you're doing like DaVinci, Final Cut Pro, you test the export times and it is exactly the same as if it was connected to the MagSafe charger. When it comes to the actual battery life, the M1 Pro is going to be more efficient than the M1 Max because a lot of times you're not really going to be using all of the cores that are on the graphics side of the M1 Max. And so at the end of the day, even if you're running like everyday tasks, it is going to drain a little bit more. So that is why for most like moderate to light users or day-to-day users of the MacBook Pro, I would say that for the majority, the M1 Pro processor is going to be more than enough. If you're going to be editing video and pushing the processor to the absolute max, so you're still not going to get like an insane amount of battery life. I would say it's about 40% better than what I had on the MacBook Pro 16-inch. So before, if you're getting like maybe like 3 to 4 hours, which I would say is pretty accurate on the MacBook in previous generations, I was probably getting about 5 to 6 hours on this generation of MacBook Pro. So when it comes to the webcam quality, with conference calls being more prominent than ever before, I've got to say it's been a long time coming. And it's more so like it's finally here as opposed to a complete breakthrough because we have seen some updates to the iMac webcams and it was kind of inevitable to make its way over to the MacBook line. This right here is a 1080p webcam, and with the image signal processor, it is able to give you a better image quality, of course, but at the same time, it's also 2 times better in low light performance. So here's a test of the webcam on the brand new MacBook Pro 16-inch. It is a 1080p resolution, and it also has the improved ISP. And generally speaking, you can see that the exposure does do a pretty good job of separating where the face is and exposing it effectively because there's actually a pretty harsh light that is coming from in front of me, but at the same time, the back and everything is still decently well lit. And just to give you a bit of like a tour and more of a visualization of the quality in the webcam and also in the microphone. We are using the built-in microphone right now, but generally speaking, I would say this is like a really good improvement for like conference calls and everything where like you don't really need the best camera quality as long as it's able to get the job done, but I do feel like it's a pretty good step up from the 720p that we saw in the previous generations. The quality of the previous generation MacBook webcams are honestly just so bad. You can absolutely tell when anybody is using it, and for most calls, I've actually been using my phones just because even though it doesn't really matter, it's just like, it doesn't look good. And to compare, this year's is obviously a huge difference in terms of the image quality, so it's really great that they fixed that. The mic quality is still very good. Apple has done a very good job in focusing on like the audio side of things, and we've kind of seen those updates for many years now, and the speakers once again sound great. If you're watching movies or just listening to music casually, the power is definitely there. It is very crisp and clear. The acoustics and everything are very fine-tuned, but it is nice that we finally do have an upgrade in the webcam, and the only feature that I still really want to see on like future MacBooks or maybe through software is kind of what we see on like the iPads, and that is like a